Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to Insightonomics. कैसे हैं आप सब लोग? I hope you all are doing absolutely wonderful. I'm Bhavna Singh. We'll learn economics together. Stay tuned with me. Let's start the topic for today. We often confuse like how this particular MRS is equals to the ratio of the marginal utilities for good X and good Y, or sometimes you have been asked the question how this marginal rate of substitution is related with this marginal utility, because this MRS represents the slope of indifference curve. तो वहां पे ये marginal utility का concept कहाँ से आ जाता है? So we are going to solve this confusion in this particular video. We are going to clear that. It is very simple. Okay, first let me write the definition of MRS. Like, what is MRS is all about? MRS, as we know, the full form, marginal rate of substitution. Marginal rate of substitution. In our case, we have two-dimensional expression. So we have two goods like good X and good Y. So here your MRS will be like MRS XY. That means marginal rate of substitution for good X of good Y. Okay, it simple means, so by definition, let me write the definition. It simply say that the rate of substitution, or simply the rate of sacrifice. So your MRS represents the rate of sacrifice of good Y for the additional units of a unit of good X. So your MRS XY by definition is equals to the rate of sacrifice of good X for the additional unit of good X. Okay, इसका keeping the price constant. ओके, तो इसमें क्या होता है कि जैसे आपके पास दो गुड्स हैं, आपको अगर एक एडिशनल गुड एक्स का कंजम्पशन बढ़ाना है तो आपको कितने यूनिट्स गुड वाई का सेक्रीफाइस करना पड़ेगा, बिकॉज ऑन अ वन इंडिफरेंस कर्व योर यूटिलिटी इज रिमेन्स कांस्टेंट. So you can choose different bundles of good X and good Y, but the condition is you have to keep your utility constant. So अगर आप एक यूनिट पर्टिकुलर गुड का इंक्रीज करोगे तो you have to decrease the unit or units of other particular good in order to keep your level of satisfaction or utility constant. Okay, so MRS XY represents the slope of IC, that is the indifference curve. So indifference curve represents, it is a graphical representation of different combination of good X and Y which will give you the same or similar satisfaction. Graphically we can write it like this, or we can show it like this. This is our indifference curve. Why we called it indifference curve? Because sorry, this is an indifference curve. Why we called it indifference curve? Because the utility remains same along this particular curve. Okay, आप इस पॉइंट पे कंज्यूम करो, आप इस पॉइंट पे कंज्यूम करो, या इस पॉइंट पे कंज्यूम, योर बंडल्स माइट चेंज, द कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ गुड एक्स एंड गुड वाई माइट चेंज, but the utility that you derive from that consumption will remain the same. So consumer is indifferent between all the bundles along this curve. Okay, so slope of this particular curve is known as, or is represented by MRS, this particular slope, okay. So in case of these non-linear curves, we derive this We derive the particular slopes by drawing a tangents. So like in this case, like this is our one tangent, this is our second tangent, third one. We can name these bundles, like this is our bundle A, B, and C. At this particular bundle, like you have some X and Y, we can do 1, X and Y 2, and here you have X comma Y 3. So at this point, like I can draw it as well for you. We'll take this color, different one. So at this point, like you are having more of Y, less of X. Okay. At this point, you are having you can say equal amount of good Y and good X. And at this particular point, you are consuming more of X and less of Y. Okay. You can like this is X1, this is X2, this is X3. Similarly, this is Y1, Y2, and Y3. But at all the points, you have different slope, and this is decreasing as well. Okay. So first, like let me clear like what is MRS. MRS is the slope of difference curve IC. Okay. So slope is represented by this del Y by del S. That say how many units of Y needs to be sacrificed in order to get one additional unit of good X. Okay. This is represented by the slope. Now, like you might get the question how this particular slope is equals to the ratio of the marginal utility for good X and good Y. How come this MRS is related or equals to this slope with respect to this marginal utility of X and Y? How come these are equals to each other? So we'll derive it and we'll prove it. Okay, so like let's consider a utility function. General form. Like this is your utility function. As we know, our utility is a function of quantities of goods and services consumed. So in our case, we have two goods. So in this case, utility is a like utility function represents the functional relationship between good X and good Y and the level of utility that consumer derives from that consumption. Okay. Now, as we know, marginal utility with respect to X is the partial derivative of this utility with respect to, okay, like first, how they are related to each other. First, let me clear that. We have to take the derivative of u. Okay, this whole function, the total derivative. So it will be like du, and the derivative of this with respect to x and with respect to y, because we are taking total derivative. So we can also write it like this: u with respect to x into dx du dy into dy. And or you can, this is in function form, we can write it like this: your utility is a function of x and y, and this x del x del f y to del y. Okay, this is the total derivative or total change in utility as a result of change in x and change in y. So as we know, along an indifference curve, you might have different combinations for good X and good Y, but your level of satisfaction or the utility will remain same. Okay. So when your utility will remain same, it is not changing. So there is no change in your level of utility or satisfaction. So this change in utility will be zero because you are having a same utility. with different combinations of good X and good Y. Okay, so write it here. And one thing, let me tell you, as we know, MUX is equals to this particular du by dx, and your MUY is equals to du with dy. That means partial derivative of utility with respect to x and partial derivative of utility with respect to y. Okay, so this is your MUX, this is equals to your MUX, this is equals to your MUY. So we can write it like this. As we know, our del y is del u is 0. There is no change in utility, so it is 0. We got this expression MUX into del x plus MUY into del y. एंड अभी हमें क्या डेल वाई स्लोप के टर्म्स में इक्वेशन चाहिए, तो हम लोग इस पर्टिकुलर टर्म के दूसरे साइड शिफ्ट करेंगे. सो यू विल गेट एम यू वाई. दिस इज इन पॉजिटिव साइन. इसको दूसरी साइड शेयर करेंगे लेफ्ट हैंड साइड, ये नेगेटिव हो जाएगा. डेल वाई दिस एम यू एक्स टू डेल एक्स. what is the slope of MRS? डेल वाई बाई डेल एक्स, राइट. तो हमें डेल वाई के टर्म डेल वाई के टर्म्स में इक्वेशन चाहिए, तो जो हमारा एम यू वाई है वो दूसरी साइड डिनोमिनेटर में चला जाएगा. सो इट इज नेगेटिव एम यू एक्स बाई एम यू वाई डेल एक्स. ये एक्स स्लोप के टर्म्स में चाहिए, इसको हम लोग इस साइड भेज देंगे, लेफ्ट हैंड साइड डिनोमिनेटर में आएगा. जस्ट वेट, लेट मी राइट इट हियर. del y by del x is equals to minus mux by MUY. So, and this particular ratio of change in y as a result of change in x is equals to your MRS, and your MRS represents the slope of IC. So now we got the final expression, like how come this particular MRS is equals to this ratio of marginal utility. Okay. So I have proved this, and like what this negative sign depicts, this negative sign depicts the downward sloping curve, downward sloping nature of the indifference curve. Like we have this particular curve, it is downward sloping, that's why it is negative. Okay. And it also depicts that as you consume more of X, like based on the law of diminishing marginal utility, as you consume more of X, you are deriving lesser and lesser utility, marginal utility with the additional consumption of X. तो जैसे जैसे X consumption बढ़ाते जाओगे, आपकी जो marginal utility है वो कम होती जाएगी based on the law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay, and that's why that depict the negative sign कि आपकी utility कम होती जा रही है जैसे जैसे आप कंजम्पशन बढ़ाते जा रहे हो. एंड सिमिलरली लाइक वाइस वर्सा फॉर गुड वाई, जैसे जैसे कंजम्पशन बढ़ाते जाओगे गुड वाई का, मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी कम होती जाएगी. एंड जैसे जैसे आप इस केस में क्या हो रहा है, ये जैसे जैसे आप एक्स को कंजम्पशन बढ़ाते जा रहे हो, you have to bring down the consumption of good y because you have to keep the level of satisfaction same. And this is based on the assumption like more is better. जितना ज्यादा आप कंज्यूम करोगे आपको उतना ज्यादा सेटिस्फेक्शन मिलेगा. सो अगर आपको लेवल ऑफ यूटिलिटी कांस्टेंट रखना है, तो अगर आप एक पर्टिकुलर गुड का कंजम्पशन बढ़ा रहे हो, तो आपको फॉर श्योर दूसरे गुड का कंजम्पशन कम करना पड़ेगा. ओके. तो यह जैसे जैसे आप एक्स का कंजम्पशन बढ़ाते जा रहे हो, आपको वाई का कंजम्पशन कम करना हो रहा है. So that's why this sign is negative, and negative sign also depicts the law of diminishing marginal returns कि आपकी utility कम होती जा रही है, marginal utility with the additional consumption. Okay. And so this is the proof for this, and this is it. I hope लोगों को clear हुआ होगा ये. It is very simple.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you find our content insightful and productive, make sure to share, subscribe, and hit that like button. That will help us to grow and learn together. If you had any suggestions, queries, please do comment us, and you can join us on our Telegram channel. Thank you. मिलता है next video में.